Well, hello there, Prepper Nation. How are you? Good morning, son. This is John. I appreciate you being here. How long have you been here? If you've been here supporting the channel for a little while, I appreciate it. And if you're brand new, maybe consider hitting subscribe. And I appreciate all these and yada, 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 all the YouTuber stuff. Anyway, now that that's out of the way, do you remember um, when Russia invaded Ukraine? They first invaded Ukraine. I remember the prepping community the next morning, like it was the lightning rod. Everybody was talking about it. It seemed like 24/7, and maybe rightfully so. But I put out a video and I said, look, we're just going to talk about this war ever so often. Kind of a war update or a war report. When important things are happening, okay, we'll talk about it. But it's not going to be each and every single day. And we kind of did that. And, every few weeks we talk about the war in Ukraine. So that is what it is this morning. We're updating on that war, what's going on, what can we expect, even back here in the United States, what kind of implications are we talking about? So NATO, not a fan. I got to be honest with you. But NATO chief Stoltenberg, I think is how you pronounce the man's last name. He said a few days ago in a press conference, he was talking about Ukraine's President Zelensky. He said at some point after, these spring offensive and counteroffensives are over, we're going to approve them. We're going to bring them into NATO. We're going to make them a NATO country, which is problematic because at that point, NATO is going to point to a certain article that they have, and they're going to say, well, now you're attacking a member of NATO. Now we have to get involved, legally speaking. So at first, when I saw this press conference, I said, what is this man? What is he doing? What is he talking about? If you bring Ukraine, it's unprecedented. Think about this for a second. When has a country ever been accepted during a time of war into this kind of situation? The moment NATO says, come on, come with us, we'll protect you in the middle of a war, the moment that happens, Russia is going to begin their onslaught against NATO. So I'm like, what is this man thinking? I had to step back. Sometimes, as y'all have pointed out here in the chat, sometimes rather than looking at a few trees, you got to step back. You got to look at the whole forest there, son. You got to find out what's going on. You got to appreciate the madness for what it is. So as I'm looking at this, I realize NATO does not know how to defeat Russia. They're literally running out of options at this point. I don't care about them getting on TV and saying this. We know otherwise. Stuff is leaked out. They don't know how to defeat them. NATO has tried to sanction Russia. They tried that at the beginning. Oh, we're going to sanction their millionaires. We're going to crash their economy. We're going to make things very painful on people in Russia. Their economy is actually up 3% as opposed to the beginning of the war. Now, where are we at in the United States since the beginning of the war? What does ours look like? For example, sanctions have not worked. They jumped from sanctions and they went to this period where NATO was trying to cut supply lines off from Russia. We got to stop them from getting supplies. That didn't last very long because Russia has the supplies. They literally have what many of the NATO countries are depending on. You understand? They scooped this stuff up at the very beginning prior to the invasion. So that didn't work. Then NATO tried to turn Russia's allies against it, namely China, but others as well. And they got stonewalled every single time. Their allies have remained with them. Then we sent in people, we sent in our soldiers to Poland to train the Ukrainian troops. We brought Ukrainian troops here on U.S. soil to train them on certain things, and that hasn't worked. That hasn't made much of a difference. We've sent how much money? I don't know. We've sent a ton of money to Ukraine. We've sent other means of aid, be it food, be it clothes, whatever. We've sent weapons. We've sent major military hardware. tanks. We've sent all kinds of stuff, artillery shells by the millions NATO has sent, and it still hasn't worked. NATO truly does not know how to defeat Russia. And they're running into a serious issue here because, as we talked about a little bit last week, NATO, they cannot supply Ukraine much longer. It's a supply chain thing. I wish we weren't all attached at the hip, this nation to this nation. I hate it, but we are. The NATO countries are attached at the hip, and we don't have the ability to produce the kind of artillery shells, specifically small arms too, but mainly artillery shells. Ukrainians are burning through that faster than we can keep up. And it's projected within the next month or two, two being the latest, they're going to run out. They're not going to have any more artillery. The United States has tried to talk sense into Zelensky, tactically withdraw, kind of regroup, give us time to get you supply. We don't know how to defeat them, and here's why. NATO countries, and the United States heavily, but also other NATO countries, Germany's another fine example, they've moved away from conventional warfare, and they've moved into a smarter way to fight wars. Okay, they've moved into drones, they've moved into intelligence, counterintelligence, kind of getting away from who has as many, who has more battleships, and how can we utilize this cutting edge technology. And that's smart if you're fighting a high-tech war. Okay, the United States is head and shoulders above the rest, I think, especially when you get into the Navy and stuff like this. The issue is Russia, somewhere along the way, they realized, okay, if we fight conventional war 101, they're not going to be able to keep up with us. They can't produce enough bodies. They can't produce enough artillery. They don't have the infrastructure set up to churn more out at a rapid pace. So Russia's figured this out, that we cannot defeat them in conventional warfare. All right, that's not a knock against our military. I think we have a much stronger military than the Russians or even the Chinese, but the way we're set up, I mean, let's face it, the United States likes to drone strike, or we like to come in and airstrike certain area, take out assets, weaken the enemy, and they're done. And we're out, in a timely manner. This is how we would like to fight our wars or our conflicts. We don't even like to call them wars. Russia's not allowing this. The more we do, the more we get dragged into conventional warfare, and that's by design. We could, in theory, go into Russia. I think the United States could go into Russia and defeat Russia. But that's not going to happen because what? Because they have nukes. Russia has nukes. I think the United States understands, NATO understands, Russia will deploy these things. They will fire them off. They have nuke-capable submarines and warships all over the place now. They're off our eastern border. They have the ability to reach out, take out the entire eastern coast here in the United States. I mean, they truly do. You cannot go into and occupy and take over a country that has nukes. That's the issue. That is straight up. That's the issue right there. That's why NATO has not already jumped on this. All right. So NATO, they're really running out of options. And the people that are funding NATO and pulling the strings over at NATO, they're running out of options. Their hair's got to be getting gray like mine because they just don't know what to do. The only option left for them is to fast track World War III. And I think getting back to this man's original statement, yeah, we will welcome Ukraine in with open arms into NATO. He's bound to know the moment that happens, World War III is going to kick off because the Russians are not going to back off. They're not going to say, okay, they're with NATO, we're out. That's never going to happen. What that's going to do is that is going to give NATO an excuse to begin moving their assets into Ukraine all over the place, soldiers and things. And the first time that they're hit by Russia, it's going to be on. They're going to start attacking Russia, Russia's allies, namely China. They're going to get involved, and then we have our world war. I mean, that's just how it's going to play out. Now, here's the kicker, okay? This, at the end of the day, accomplishes many, many pieces of the agenda. A lot of boxes get checked off, okay? Because war and rebuilding after war is very good for business. There are a lot of rich people that are attached to NATO, many of them in the United States, many companies and CEOs and things that have gotten rich through endless war. This is going to sink more money into their pockets. And then there are other companies that go in after the fact. They nation build, they rebuild, they get rich, okay, at the expense of others. So that's going to check that box off. Depopulation. It's going to begin to check that box off because a lot of people are not going to make it through World War III. I'm sorry to say, I understand that it's over in Europe and not necessarily here in the United States, but we're getting to that, okay? The dollar would collapse. So it's well on its way already, but it would absolutely collapse because we don't have a standing economy that is strong enough to fight a war. I don't think we can handle a war on two fronts, and I definitely don't think that we can involve ourselves in a World War III with the economy that we have. There are a lot of people here in the United States that are demanding we go to war, demanding that we get involved in Ukraine, boots on the ground. I've seen these people all over the place on social media. Why are we not already in Ukraine taking care of Russia? Well, again, we do have idiots in charge, but even they know we're not winning conventional war with Russia. We cannot afford another 20-year war. Russia knows this. They are willing to suffer for 20 years if that's what it takes. And they have the manpower already to fight that war through conscription. They know the United States has not the manpower nor the money to fight a 20-year war. And they know the United States is not going to be able to defeat them with kind of the advanced warfare that they use now. These people are demanding war here in the United States, but guess what? They're not going to go. When push comes to shove, and we run into some sort of a draft, these people are not going to go. And that would lead to social chaos here in the United States. That's one thing that you would see immediately. As soon as we're dragged into this war officially, you're going to see a pitch and a push for conscription, for a draft, because we just don't have the numbers. The moment you see that, it's like a house of cards falling down, because these people are going to lose their minds. They're going to realize they're on the hook to go fight in Ukraine. These folks are what I like to call bumper sticker activists, or hashtag activist, or whatever, social justice warriors and all this stuff. They like to throw a "I support Ukraine" or "I stand with Ukraine" bumper sticker on the back of their car, and then drive the car and think that that's winning the war. And that is not going to win this war. It is going to take a massive amount of people being thrown in like cannon fodder before this thing is over. And as I said, America doesn't have enough boots for this war, much less a war here and a front over in Taiwan. We just don't have it. But here's the thing, okay? The next chapter of human history, I think it's been a mess, hasn't it? Between the pandemic and 9/11 and everything that's transpired, that chapter, it feels like that chapter of human history is about to close. With the collapse of the dollar and the switch over, I think, to the BRICS system and everything based on the Chinese and their currency and stuff, it feels like that chapter's closing and we're getting ready to open a new chapter. And it's going to be a nasty chapter. This thing is turning into a horror novel over here, son, to be honest with you. But the good news, if you've been prepping, you're in the 10%. You know, they predict in an event like this, or, total grid down long term, which we're likely to see during a World War III, up to 90% of people will not make it. They just don't have what they need at home. They themselves do not have the infrastructure in place to get what they need in order to survive. Preppers do. Preppers do. And if you've been stacking and you've been listening and you've been preparing, you're in the top 10%. So that's good news at least. I'll just add that I would highly encourage you to practice gray man, both now, but especially if NATO, the day NATO says Ukraine's part of us now, you better become as gray as humanly possible, because it is going to go off here like a powder keg in the United States. You're going to see suffering. You're going to see anger. You're going to see people lashing out. People are going to lash out at people that have things and they don't. I mean, it's just going to be nasty. Neighbors will become one of the top threats um, in a scenario like that. I'm shooting straight with y'all. You know, you're supposed to love your neighbor, but in a situation like that, either your neighbor's already with you and you've already game planned together, whether you want to call it a mag or just, you know, just a neighborhood coming together, or your neighbors are going to be huge threats because they see a lot more things than the rest of the people in this world. And they will um, do a bunch of this and people will show up at your house. So please practice being gray. Folks, this is John with Prepper Nation. I appreciate each and every one of you being here the way you do and packing it out. It's truly appreciated. God bless y'all. Love you. See you tomorrow.